John McCrae is a Canadian of Scottish origin, born in Guelph, Ontario. He's very much a product of the late 19th century. His father's a militia lieutenant colonel in the artillery in Guelph. He is a cadet in high school. He joins the militia, his father's regiment, at a very early age. After he graduates from Guelph Collegiate, he goes to the University of Toronto and joins the Queen's Own Rifles at the University of Toronto. He gets a BA in English. Then he goes to medical school and graduates in 1898. While he's basically doing his interning and residency, the South African War begins. And McCrae, as that product of his time, as a militiaman, thinks it's his duty to join the forces. He gets into the artillery, goes to South Africa as a lieutenant in the artillery, and serves for essentially a year in that war, a bloody, nasty war, where he is, I think, a little bit disillusioned, but nonetheless returns back to Canada with his imperialism intact, his military ardor intact. He works as a pathologist primarily in Montreal, teaches at McGill and at the University of Vermont, establishes a wide circle of medical friends and also literary friends. He's written poetry throughout his life, written poetry at university, published some. In Montreal, he's friendly with Stephen Leacock and others of a cultural bent. And he knows all the right people. He talks literature. He's a single man, but he's a valued guest at parties because he's funny, cheerful, optimistic, and still an imperialist in an era when that mattered very much. So when the war begins in 1914, the Great War, 1st Canadian Division is posted around the town of Ypres in Belgium in April 1915. It has seen a little bit of action, not much, but it's in what is thought to be a quiet sector, a salient sticking into the German lines at that point. To the stunning surprise of everyone, towards the end of April, the Germans launch a massive gas attack at Ypres. It smashes a French colonial division on the left side of the Canadians. It creates a huge gap in the line. The Canadians are now about to be cut off if they're not careful. A German gas attack strikes the Canadian lines. There are no gas masks. There's no preparations. No one has ever in war suffered an attack by chlorine gas. Men choke, die, collapse. It's only with extraordinary efforts that people are able to resist the Germans. They struggle, they fire back as the Germans advance. The Germans hadn't expected their great success. And the Canadians hold them, but are being gradually pushed back. McCrae survives. Many of the men in his artillery brigade do not. Towards the end of April, beginning of May, one of McCrae's friends, a Lieutenant Alexis Helmer, is literally blown to bits by German shell fire. And McCrae watches as the pieces of the body are gathered up, and McCrae reads the service at the burial. Hasty burials scraped into the field. A day or so later, he is said to be sitting on the back of an ambulance, and he picks up his pencil and scribbles very quickly a few lines. He shows them to a messenger nearby. The messenger reads them, thinks they're good, but McCrae thinks they're not worth doing anything with. His commanding officer, Morrison, takes the poem and sends it sometime later to Punch magazine in London, and it's published in December 1915. It becomes almost instantly the poem of the Great War. It somehow catches a mood, and McCrae, who didn't think that he'd done anything particularly good, anything that he as a poet particularly liked, finds himself famous during the war, with his poem being used for recruiting, being used for trying to encourage the Americans to come into the war, being used by everybody on the Allied side. And it makes him famous. He has written what turns out to be the most famous poem of World War I. What turns out to be as well the most famous poem ever by a Canadian, ever. It's arguably the only Canadian poem that is world famous, that almost everybody would know. I'm no poetry critic. I'm not a scholar of English literature or poetry. His poem is very moving to me. When it's read on Remembrance Day, November 11th, it brings a tear to my eyes and to most everyone else's. But the curious thing is that that poem is remembered now almost as a pacifist anthem. It's McCrae's hymn to loss, to death, to sacrifice. But to him, it was a call for action. Take up the torch. If you break faith with us, it will waste all those lives in Flanders Fields. I think the poem is misinterpreted now, and it's very interesting. In 1915, 16, 17, 18, when it was fresh, everyone knew what it meant. It was a call to do your duty and serve. 100 years later, the poem has somehow gone full circle. It's no longer a call for sacrifice. It's a call to remember the loss of war, to not fight war. It's interesting the way opinion has changed. And I think that says something about how our era differs from 100 years ago. It's the key thing in the way we remember the Great War. It wasn't at the time it was a war for civilization. Today it's a war of waste, loss, and horror. And McCrae's poem is seen as, it was seen as a call to win that war for civilization 100 years ago. Now it's seen as almost a hymn to the waste of war. So attitudes have changed dramatically. At the beginning of June 1915, McCrae is ordered to leave his artillery brigade and to work as a physician, surgeon, doctor at the Canadian General Hospital that is being set up at Boulogne, France. It's being run by doctors from McGill, and basically they insisted that he come and join them, and the army orders were cut. So he's sad to leave the artillery, but he does, and he goes to Boulogne. And he spends 2.5 years there, treating hundreds of thousands of casualties. Basically, it's one of the main streaming points for the wounded from the Somme, Vimy Ridge, Passchendaele, all of the great bloody battles in which Canadian and British troops fight. He is losing his optimism. He was an optimistic man as a youth, but this war has gone on and on and on. He's seen too many friends killed, seen too many lives destroyed. There doesn't seem to be an end. By January 1918, he is desperately tired. He's always suffered from asthma, and now he's got bronchitis, and he's beginning to break down. He gets meningitis, pneumonia, and early in January 1918, he dies. He'd been ill for a few days, and he dies. He's buried with substantial pomp and ceremony for a casualty of the Great War. He is a famous man by this point, and the commander of the Canadian Corps, General Arthur Currie, comes to his funeral. Nurses and doctors from the hospital, high representatives of many of the other armies come to attend his funeral. He's famous, and he's buried as a famous man in a communal grave in a small town north of Boulogne. His grave, I think, is visited by many people. So also is the little hole in the trench, really, hole in a dike, where he had his dressing station through Ypres. I've been there. It's a scurvy little place alongside a canal, but it is marked by a plaque because it was where McCrae operated and tried to save as many lives as he could in 1915. I think we need to remember McCrae as a man of his time. He's not a great man. He's a very good doctor who writes competent poetry. I don't think anybody would say he is a great poet. He's not Wordsworth. He's not Yeats. He's a competent poet and a very good doctor who is a product of the late 19th, early 20th century. He thinks that Britain is always right. He thinks that it's Canada's duty to support the British. He thinks that the war is a just cause. Most Canadians did. He thinks that the Germans must be defeated. Most Canadians, like him, did. He thinks that the soldiers are doing God's work, literally. And I think most Canadians also thought that. But because he's a normal human being, he is appalled at what he sees around him. He's appalled at the casualties, appalled at the cost of life, appalled at the cruelty and the bloodshed that is everywhere, and the destruction that is everywhere. And yet he persists as long as he is physically able to do so. His job is to try to save lives in a war that is dedicated to destroying them. So we should remember him as a doctor, as a poet, as a British Canadian of his era, as one of the men and women who went to war in 1914, 1918 for a great cause that they believed in.